大快人心，马斯克当面对质经济学人主编，他也是反华女主编，这次终于栽了跟头，谈到中国 AI， 他开始急了。一起来看现场画面视频。
Competent Chinese AI companies that several that are very good. The new Kimi model.
Kimi K3, yeah, the one that came out last week, it was almost as good as Fable, right? So it's...
Well, I think realistically, Fable is still clearly the smartest model. I think anyone realistically would say that that's still the case. But the Kimi model is getting quite close to Fable. Now, Anthropic had Mythos, from which Fable is derived. I think they had that ready in February. So they've got sort of what they call, I'm not sure what they call it, but Mythos 2 or Fable 6 or something much better than what they had in February. They almost certainly have, not almost certainly, they certainly have right now. So, and I think they could release it at any time.
Just before we get on to releasing, how do you think about the Chinese models and the geopolitics of it? Are you worried about the Chinese catching up and getting ahead?
Given that the Chinese AI companies are doing as well as they are with a relatively small amount of compute, it seems though that if they had a lot of compute, there's a good chance that they would be the leaders. And at some point, they probably will have a lot of compute.
So they will be the leaders.
There's a good chance that they are the leaders at some point. You can think of like the constraints on AI are essentially electricity and AI chips. And then for physical AI, the robots. China's also got some very good robot companies. In fact, they have these like robot sporting events. I don't know if you've seen some of them.
Yes, I have. I saw them last time I was in Beijing. I saw the robots.
Well, and then they have the sort of like a boxing match or fighting match with the robots, which is quite entertaining. And I saw some video of a robot that got its head knocked off, kept fighting, even with its head knocked off. It looked pretty funny. But, I mean, in fact, I think the robot battles are going to be quite entertaining to watch.
But just
so China's very strong on robots, very strong on digital AI, and if you look at electricity production, you can say like AI is a function of whatever the limiting factor is, if it's chips or electricity. China has far more electricity than the United States. In fact, China has more electricity than the United States, Europe, and India combined already, and is heading to, and my guess is China gets to 4 times the electricity production of the US, which is roughly proportionate to the population.
What should the US government do about this? I mean, if you presumably it is a little alarming if you have an authoritarian regime far ahead in the most powerful technology. And clearly what the US government's been trying to do is, with the export controls and so forth, keep China back. Do you think they should ban the use of K3, Kimi K3, for example?
Well, the US government can't, they can pass some law that prevents US companies from using Chinese models, but they can't stop the rest of the world from using them. So it's not like the US government has authority over China or the rest of the world.
Do you think they should stop US companies from using them? There's talk of that right now, right?
I don't think that helps. That won't stop China from being the leader in AI. Really, it's for digital intelligence, it comes down to how much AI compute do you have? How many chips do you have, and how much power do you have? How much electricity do you have? So the constraint right now, I think, is actually slightly more on power and cooling than it is on AI chips, because the power demands of the AI chips are very, very high. We'll talk about water demands, but really the water usage of AI is negligible, or almost nothing. But the electrical demand is very high.
That's why you're thinking of orbital data centers, presumably.
Yes, the constraint for any AI chips not being turned on in China is electricity, and like power and cooling, and the electrical equipment and everything. The rate at which AI chips are being made exceeds the rate at which new electricity is coming online.
In China? Okay.
Outside of China.
Outside China, I see, yeah.
And since China, the U.S. has banned the export of the latest AI chips to China, China is somewhat chip-starved.
But they are becoming much more efficient at using the chips that they have. And that one of the striking things of Kimi K3, right, is how efficiently they...
And China is also, I think, closer than most people realize to solving the lithography problem, which would enable them to make AI chips at very large volumes. So I think there's, this shouldn't evolve into just a China conversation, but so the current constraint is electricity outside of China. In China, the constraint is chips. Once we address the power constraint with AI data centers in space, then the constraint will once again be chips outside of China.
That suggests to me that you need China and the US, if you're going to have some overall safety constraints, that they will need to work together. If you are going to try and you suggested, the 5 model makers here working.
Probably it should include the Chinese companies that are doing frontier AI models too.
And do you think governments need to be involved?
My recommendation would be that if some of the leading companies in AI say that a new model is very dangerous, then they should inform the government. And a new model is very dangerous, and that the company producing that model is not taking steps to address the danger, then they should alert the government to take action to limit the release of that model. And that could be action by the Chinese government or action by the U.S. government. It's really just the U.S. government and the Chinese government that have the power to take action here.
But I guess people would be worried about relying on a group of model builders to decide whether to do this. I mean, if you look at what the US government has done with Mythos, they stepped in because they were worried about the cybersecurity risks, and they stepped in using threat of export controls to prevent the widespread release of this model. I find it hard to see how governments will not want to keep that power, that they ultimately decide whether a model gets released.
I think they should have that power, but it wasn't as though someone in the government figured out that Mythos had some scary cybersecurity risks. It was Amazon. Amazon highlighted this, and Amazon called the White House.
So you'd have a system where the model makers would check each other's work. If there was something that worried them, you'd tell the government.
Yeah.
The government would then think. Okay,
if there's something that was worrisome and that company was not doing anything to address that risk, then that would be the moment for government to step in and take action, which is literally what occurred with Mythos.
How soon does all this have to happen?
Well, I think it'd be good to do that. I think immediately, really.
Yeah, that's what people keep telling me. We have to get some kind of system in the next 6 months because of the pace at which the models are improving.
Yeah, 6 months is a long time.
So you think shorter than that?
Well, there's so many AI breakthrough announcements, sometimes multiple per day. How many were there last week?
A lot.
I lost track.
Yeah, a lot. So you basically, whether it's Demis's proposal or others, you need to get together and get this set up kind of now, it sounds like you're telling me.
Yeah, I would recommend that we at least have some sort of informal weekly or bi-weekly call, and that there's maybe a week or 2 weeks of early access by competitors. And this is why I think the incentives work, is because if competing companies, I think, are likely to understand if something is a security risk, and they're not going to be shy about highlighting that their competitors' models should be delayed in release.
Is that...
I think the incentive structure does work quite well there. And if this is sort of how it works with the Motion Picture Association. You know, it's an industry group that decides how movies should be rated. You know, whether it's appropriate for young children or not. And that seems to have worked quite well. So, and then you really just ask the government to intervene if a company is doing something very dangerous and refuses to take action to reduce the danger.
Do you think this is a tricky one? But you guys don't much like each other, and you don't much trust each other. You're insulting each other on social media constantly. So do you think you can do that with people that you dislike, that where there seems to be such kind of personal vitriol between some of these leaders?
Yes. Well, I'm not a fan of Sam Altman because if you started a nonprofit that was meant to be an open source AI company and owned by the world, and it somehow got turned into an $800 billion for-profit company with closed source, I think you'd be like, well, wait a second, that's the exact opposite of what I donated the money for. That's my issue. I think it's a legitimate one. And then Dario, I think, also is not a fan of Sam Altman because he felt, in fact, the reason the Anthropic team left OpenAI is because they didn't trust Sam Altman. Otherwise, Anthropic wouldn't exist. They would still be at OpenAI. I think Dario is a very principled person. He cares about things a lot. Cares about the future of the world, and I think everyone I've met at Anthropic so far has been, I'm like, no one set off my evil detector. You know, they always seem like they're well-intentioned. And the road to hell is, I think, mostly paved with bad intentions. There are a few well-intentioned paving stones in there, so we don't want to be complacent. But at the end of the day, if we have to talk, we'll talk. I mean, set aside our personal differences for the good of the world type of thing.
Well, that's a very good thing for the rest of us to hear.
Yeah.
Can we turn to one other risk that people worry about, particularly, I think, ordinary Americans, where, you know, AI has become incredibly unpopular. 75% of people are worried about it. And I think they worry about their jobs. And if you look at, Dario has said famously, 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs will be gone within a few years. You're building humanoid robots.
Yes, he also said, Dario did dig his own grave here regarding Mythos, because he said, you know, Mythos is like super scary, terrifying, and also, by the way, we're going to release it. And then he's like, what do you mean? You know, so I think probably in the future we'll choose his words differently.
But what's
because
your
obviously, if you terrify everyone and then say, "Oh, we're releasing this terrifying thing," people will obviously be alarmed about that. You know, you've literally told them to be scared, and then you release the scary thing, and so they will be scared. That is natural.
So I certainly don't want you to alarm people, but I do think there is a really important debate about how quickly and to what degree AIs displace people from jobs, because it is, as you say, if in 10 years there's more intelligence, artificial intelligence, than any human intelligence.
Yes.
And if you are, and I think you're ahead of everyone, at least in this country, on powering humanoid robots, that's also going to be kind of factory work. So are you closer to Dario, let's say, in your sense of the pace at which jobs are going to be displaced?
I do think it's going to be a bumpy road, because AI will be able to do any job better than any person can do that job. And that will be true very quickly of jobs that are digital, or really anything that involves a person at a computer or on a phone. AI could do all of that. We'll be able to do all of that very soon. I mean, for software engineering, we already have a situation where AI is better than at least 90% of humans at writing software. 90% of professional software engineers at writing software. And I mean, really, it's getting to the point where it'll be better than 99%, and then it'll get to the point where there's just no way to compete. It'll get to what I call stockfish level. So stockfish.
Okay,
So
yeah,
Stockfish is the chess program that Stockfish is so good at chess that it will easily beat Magnus Carlsen or anyone at chess even running on a small computer. I suspect that you could probably run Stockfish on your phone and beat Magnus Carlsen. That's how good it is at chess. And that's how good AI will be at writing software.
And beyond software?
And that applies to everything.
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 But what about you for physical jobs, for assembly jobs? You will also need the capability in humanoid robots, which so far isn't there yet, is it?
Right. So that's why I said digital AI and then physically manifested AI in the form of robots, where the robot is more or less an end effector. It would have some amount of local intelligence, but be managed by a large AI model. I've said many times, I think work is going to be optional. So, so I think maybe a good comparison would be gardening. Like, you don't have to garden. You don't have to grow vegetables in your garden. You can go to the store and they're going to be pristine vegetables, or you could grow vegetables in your garden and they will actually be less perfect. Your tomatoes are not going to be as plump and juicy as the ones at the store. They'll look a little artisanal. But if you go to a friend's house and they make dinner and it's with vegetables from their garden, it's a nice touch.
So that's
this is what work is going to be like.
I get that. I mean, in that world, I would be hopeless because I can't garden to save my life. But I get the idea. People still like playing chess with each other, even though every computer is better. But let's just think about the politics of this.
Yeah.
Because it sounds you're describing a world where within 10 years, pretty much every job can be done better by an intelligence. And
yes,
you're seeing huge returns to this intelligence. To people like you're the wealthiest man in the world. People who lose their jobs, who are displaced, who may go off and garden, but how are they going to live? And what kind of, it sounds to me like
universal high income.
But how are you going to get there? Let's talk about the politics of this. Because right now, if we look at the political pressures in most countries, people are very, very worried about this, very against it. I mean, it seems to me that there's a risk that we are heading more for revolution than for an easy route to this nirvana you're playing out.
I mean, it will be a bumpy road. I'm not suggesting it will be a sort of that everything will be smooth sailing here. So, I mean, there are many jobs that used to exist that don't exist because of computers. I mean, the word computer used to refer to a person doing computations. Like, that used to be a job description of a person. And you can see pictures online of buildings that have entire skyscrapers just filled with people doing calculations to do things like calculate the interest on your bank balance. This is how things were done for a long time until computers came around. And even in the beginning, computers were very expensive and hard to use. So the thing that's different here is that the pace of change is radically accelerated. So, but still, some people were upset that their job of calculating bank interest would no longer be available. But now I think you'll be hard pressed to find people who want to do that job. So I think I have a suggestion for science fiction books people might want to read to get a sense of what the future will be like. And the best envisioning of an AI future that I've read are the books by Ian Banks, the culture books.
I'm just reading Accession. So I've thanks to you, I've started reading these. But I actually don't find that future a terribly appealing one because I don't think humans have agency in that future.
They have agency.
Minimal compared to the minds.
Small way.
But the irony, Ian Banks, as you know, was a socialist. Ian Banks had a very different political philosophy. I'm not sure
I would entirely agree with that.
Let's agree that could be where we end up. I'm concerned about the road. And we live we live in democracies and people are very worried about this. So I guess two questions. Firstly, do you have to have massive redistribution from people like you to the people who are losing their jobs? Do you need to pay more tax? Do you have much higher taxes on capital so that you fund some kind of universal income? Otherwise, what do people live off?
I think that the Treasury should just simply issue people checks. Well,
but where's the revenue coming from? I mean, I'm enough of an economist. If you just issue checks, you're going to have inflation.
This is like a lot of what we're trying to think about is these things were relevant in the past. They will not be relevant in the future. So, like inflation is simply the ratio of money to goods and services. So, if the goods and services output increases dramatically, if it increases, 1,000%, you can literally print, or these days change the database. It's not print money. It's you create money in the database, provided the creation of that money is less than the rate at which goods and services increase. You actually have deflation. So I'll make a prediction, which is that deflation will be the issue, not inflation. Because as the output of goods and services increases, if the output of goods and services increases faster than the money supply, you will have deflation.
I'm perfectly willing to believe that. You may well be right. Yeah, no, you absolutely, you may well be right. But I'm really hung up on how we get from the current polarized, angry, fearful policy we have now to this nirvana. And I think you can paint a picture where people are so scared by this, they essentially try to stop it. Maybe they can't, but you get nationalized. There's a kind of, far left government. There's exorbitant tax increases. The kind of economy crumbles because people are so worried about a future, which does sound quite scary as you describe it. So how do you handle the politics now?
It's exhilarating and terrifying.
But if you were in the,
I agree. Honestly, and if you ask me on any given day, I in fact, even intraday, I've gone from exhilaration to terror regarding AI.
And
so I want to be clear.
I'm
not sort of some, I'm not trying to be sort of candide here and just be some, everything's wonderful, some Panglossian view of the world where everything's, going to be great. No risk. I'm saying there is some risk.
I think we agree on that. I guess I'm trying to be more sort of, small bore and practical and think about what can be done now to limit those risks. And you gave a very strong argument for what you and your fellow model makers could do. What should governments do?
I think it probably would be good for us to coordinate and just highlight issues that we see in each other's models to mitigate downside risk.
Or what should you be paying more tax to fund more transfer programs?
Well, first of all, I do pay a lot of tax. So, in fact, I set a record for the most amount of taxes ever paid by a human.
That's also because you're the world's richest man.
Well, even before that. So my guess is that I will pay many trillions in tax, and I'm fine with that. That's just the way it's going to be. But I don't think in a future where money is relevant, I think taxation also becomes somewhat irrelevant.
And what about giving people a sense that they have a share in the upside?
Sure.
Giving people shares in SpaceX and Tesla. Do you think that's and there's a lot of talk about this right now.
Well, one of the reasons I took SpaceX public is so that the public could participate they could own a piece of SpaceX. Whereas as a private company, we're very limited in the number of shareholders we're allowed to have before going public. So as a public company, we can have millions of shareholders. As a private company, we're limited to just a few thousand shareholders.
Do you think there should be distribution of shares? Like, the Alaska Wealth Fund is there could you imagine a world, and some people talk about the Trump accounts being a kind of vehicle for this, that a share of your equity goes to ordinary Americans?
Right. Well, in the taxes that I pay, I mean, so for my stock options, I pay 40% income tax on a national basis, and then because I spend, about 30% of my time in California, thereabouts. I pay another sort of roughly a third of the California state taxes, which are now around 15%. So I pay about 45% in taxes, just so people know this. I don't know if it's quite, so roughly half. Then when I die, there'll be another sort of 45%, roughly half that will be taxed. So at the end of the day, I'll have a quarter of whatever I have. But I think the only thing it gives me is that for some period of time, I would have control of the direction of the companies. So it's not, that's pretty much what it gets me. And until I guess the AI is so smart that it's in charge. And at that point, controlling companies won't really matter.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think one of the other things that worries people about the direction we're heading in, and I'm going to caricature it, but people think that the direction of the world is being shaped by a very small number of incredibly powerful people, and you are right at the top of that list.
So what else is? But is this different from the past?
I agree with you. I think it was like that.
when wasn't that the case?
It was ever thus, but
it was ever thus. Exactly.
It is as you've described very vividly. It's an incredibly rapid change. And so let's start with control of your company, which you definitely have now. After the IPO, you have 80% odd of voting shares, and as I understand it, you can only be removed by a vote of shares which you yourself control. So tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you can go
there's a few
crazy.
Companies in that bucket, by the way. The AI companies, like Google's in that bucket. Alphabet is controlled by Larry and Sergey.
But I think yours is more extreme. The inability
it's the same level of they have voting control of that company. Mark Zuckerberg has control of Meta, and Mark is trying very hard on the AI front, and I think probably will also have a leading AI. I think he released one last week. So I think he'll be one of the, Meta will be one of the AI companies.
But is it sensible for one person to have so much control over a company?
I really just need to make sure that I can focus on long-term. By long-term, I just mean in the 5 to 10 years. So one of the challenges with being a public company is that the sort of the pressure to have great results every single quarter, but and to not really invest in things that may only pay off in 5 to 10 years. And in the case of SpaceX, I want to extend consciousness beyond Earth and have a growing civilization on the moon, Mars, and elsewhere in the solar system. The return, I think ultimately this would have a very high return on investment, but in the short term, we'll be spending all this money on a moon base and a Mars base, and then people are like, I'm going to get all this pressure for like, well, you missed your earnings this quarter because you spent too much on Mars. I'm like, yes. By the way, that was in the S1 prospectus, and it's literally listed as a thing we will do. But they still get grumpy about these things, So they're like, well, you had whatever, you said your gross margin would be this, and it's actually slightly worse, and now we're going to punish you, and the short sellers all descend upon you, and you get a lot of pressure.
You're
in the public
market. You're going to get a
market.
lot of that.
Yeah, so I just need some way to sort of, say like, listen, guys, we're going to focus on 5 to 10 year or longer time horizon investments. This will depress our short-term earnings, but if you take a long-term view, and there are investors, we have many investors that do take a long-term view. In fact, I'm a big fan of the retail investors. In fact, I find our retail investors, on balance, they're very insightful and have very long-term views. But part of this comes, you say, what's the incentive structure? For portfolio managers, it's sort of understandable why they put so much pressure on quarterly earnings, because their compensation and and whether they get promoted or not is dependent on how their portfolio does, and they only have a few years to make these decisions, and then they're evaluated based on those decisions over the course of sometimes only a year or less, and so since they're under pressure to have immediate returns. They then put companies under pressure to have immediate returns. So once you understand the incentive structure, the behavior naturally follows.
What about, though, key man risk? I mean, what happens, heaven forbid, but what happens if you get run over by the proverbial bus tomorrow? It is, you have total control over these companies. Do you have a plan for how they would progress without you?
I think they would actually do very well for several years. And, there's a clear roadmap or space map, I should say, for SpaceX. And there's a roadmap, actually, for Tesla, literally. So I think there's, if you look at Apple after Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs had, he had a strategic vision and a bunch of products that he had ideas for, and Apple has done very well. But when you don't have a creative genius like Steve Jobs, what you miss, what Apple's missing are the incredible breakthrough products.
Yeah.
So they make amazing phones, great computers, but Apple hasn't come up with a sort of Steve Jobs level breakthrough product.
So by analogy, that's what you bring to all of your companies. You mentioned Mars. Most people think of you as the man who wants to, create a colony on Mars, so we have multi-planetary civilization.
I've been saying that for such a long time.
You have, but now you seem more focused on AI and what AI will do in the next 10 years. And you sound much more excited about using the moon as a base from which to, pop out orbital AI satellites. Have you shifted your attention away from Mars, or are you as interested in colonizing Mars as you ever were?
I'm interested in the set of actions that propagate consciousness into the future to the maximum degree possible, so that the future light cone of consciousness is as big as we could, like that. There's an exciting future where we're a spacefaring civilization out there among the stars, and the great things that are envisioned in the non-dystopian sci-fi books and movies become real one day. I sort of want the Star Trek, Star Wars future. Star Wars was the first movie I ever saw in a theater, by the way.
Really?
Yes, probably maybe it had a profound effect on me, I suppose. So I remember it blew my mind, honestly. I think I was 6 years old, and I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Has your life been about making that happen?
Yeah, I didn't think it would be, but when I was young. But my life feels somewhat surreal. I can't believe these things are actually happening.
I think the world feels somewhat surreal.
It makes me believe in simulation theory, where it's like, well, the things I'm doing are so preposterous that it's hard to believe they're real. I mean, we've got Starship, which is the largest, most powerful flying object ever made. And we intend to launch that more than once per hour.
I know, I read that. And we can, people can quibble about how quickly it happens, but I think based on your track record, we should assume it will happen at some point.
It will happen.
I'm just sort of struck that when I am as blown away by this world as you are, and I watch it from a much more naive level, but for me, the whole evolution of AI and the capabilities of these models is in and of itself so mind-blowing.
It's pretty much happening as I thought it would.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
And not just me, many people predicted this. I think Ray Kurzweil's predictions have been remarkably accurate.
Yeah, the singularity.
Yeah.
Approaching.
马斯克直言，中国几家 AI 公司算力受限的前提下，依然保出了 Kimi 等第一梯队大模型，效率极高。中国机器人产业也发展很快，还举办过机器人竞赛事。 AI 的两大瓶颈就是电力与高芯片。中国发电量体量巨大，一旦光刻与算力瓶颈完结，中国 AI 团队极有可能成为全球的领头羊。贝多斯一直习惯于西方媒体的唱衰中国科技的固有话术，没想到马斯克公开客观认可中国 AI 潜力，不断反复追问，试图扭转话题，显得逻辑被动。这就是网传的他聊中国 AI 开始急了的由来。中国将是 AI 的领引者。麦克 CEO 扎克伯格说，美国不应该禁止中国 AI 模型来获得领先地位。同时，英伟达王仁勋早就表态，中国的 AI 不管有没有美国芯片，中国 AI 依然会不断强大。这是美国科技巨头对中国 AI 的态度。而中国的 AI 更多是开源模型，而美国接近 40% 以上的企业都在使用中国适应而强大的 AI， 这对于美国是有利的。而中国的 AI 自从2025年1月 DeepSeek 成功问世之后，再到现在的 Kimi K3 是中国自主创新的 AI 技术，也正在服务着美国在内的全世界许多国家，这对于全世界都是有利的事情。但是美国看不了，美国格局变小了，认为中国 AI 即将危害美国的安全，又该是立高墙了。中国 Kimi K3 让美国破防了。确实，中国 AI 在不断的强大，有一天中国 AI 迟早会于世界之巅。好了，本期视频就到这里，我们下期再见。感谢大家的订阅、支持与转发，非常感谢。